No, I think it's very clear that the family of President Karimov has put together a massive business empire that is worth hundreds of millions, probably billions of dollars, and it includes assets inside of Uzbekistan and outside of the country.
Can you say how they extract all this money, how they make their money?
Well, it's if we look at the way kleptocratic states operate generally, I think Uzbekistan in the end is probably going to be looked at as a prime example of this phenomenon. So, what happens is that members of the president's family begin to convert to private use what I would call state opportunities that involve licenses, business concessions, and things of that sort. So conventionally, they'll have a privileged position with natural resource companies and with things that derive from licenses like telecom providers and service providers where there's a government license involved. Conventionally, they have an advantage in connection with privatization of state businesses, and in Uzbekistan we've seen all those things. And one thing that I think is characteristic is that there was a strong focus by Uzbek family members of the Karimov family from almost the beginning on foreign exchange. So businesses that generated foreign income and foreign rights of some sort were prioritized, and that included telecom and travel companies and banks. Cement companies, but it's a massive, diversified business empire. I mean, if we look at the daughter, Gulnara, for instance, telecom holdings, taxi companies, banks, cement companies, travel agencies, a business that deals with jewelry and jewelry supply, hospital equipment. The scope of it is really staggering, and also the efforts that are taken to cloak her ownership. So we see commercial vehicles created to manage all of this, and she'll deny that she has any control over them. But in fact, patterns of direction of these businesses and payments make it completely clear that she exercises de facto control, even while they're nominees who actually are appointed to control the companies.
Uzbekistan, as you mentioned, very rich with natural resources, gold, cotton, gas,
natural gas,
oil. Yeah. Can you say that all this money which come from export of all these goods are going to the pockets of Karimov family, or they distribute more kind of smoothly through?
It's not absolutely everything. So, for instance, I know a lot of people have looked very closely at cotton, and it's difficult to find the connections there with family enterprises. But many other things, natural gas, for instance. I mean, it's clear that there were services contracts that were done. That the role was played by Gulnara Karimova in connection with the brokering of natural gas sales that were done with Gazprom, for instance. But there's also great efforts taken to keep these relationships cloaked and secret. So it's very, very difficult to prove these things. And you'll see very aggressive, assertive claims by them that they don't own these businesses. They're not controlled by them, and you can't prove it. And I'll tell you also, I know talking to journalists who've researched this, when they try to put together an article, they'll be threatened. They'll be told, we'll sue you for libel if you suggest that, for instance, that Gulnara Karimova controls Zeromax. I know those threats were made repeatedly.
Mr. Norton, when we speak about businesses of Karimov's family, mostly we speak about Gulnara. Karimov himself, Islam Karimov, seems like stands outside of all these things. Do you think that Gulnara behaves on behalf of the family? She is a business person of the family, so she makes money for the entire family, or just for herself?
Yeah, I think both daughters have some business interests, but Gulnara has been the more phenomenally successful businesswoman of the family. But I'd say it's conventional in kleptocracies around the world. It's very rare that the leader himself has business interests.
Her father,
well, I think it's not possible for her to have had some of the business successes she's had without, in fact, the support of the state, and the support of the state is not coming without the direction of her father. So yes, I think it's supported by her father. I mean, we heard several people talk today about her practices and how she acquires them. You know, there'll be tax police descend on a company, it's audited, criminal charges are brought against businessmen, and then an offer is made to acquire them. I mean, this is calculated oppression involving the state.
Mr. Norton, can you say where Gulnara Karimova and Islam Karimov keep their money?
No, I can't say. I can say that, as I said in my presentation, that there are very large sums of money that are kept offshore, that is outside of Uzbekistan, and it's dispersed with many different bank accounts,
but
which
you
is
said
also
about real estate, what they
real
buy
estate,
everywhere. Can you name the countries where they have
Spain,
and what they have?
Spain, Switzerland, France, Italy, and the United Arab Emirates are all places where they have real estate holdings.
You also said that they're now in a negotiation with some governments to let them to keep all these assets. Can you say which countries?
It's not negotiations with governments to keep assets. I would say that they acquire these assets in countries where they feel they have good relations with the government.
Like what? Like
Spain, UAE are very good examples.
And the last question, in what situation do you think is it possible that their assets going to be frozen? And as you said, it's all full kleptocracy, and all those money was stolen from people of Uzbekistan. In which situation do you think they can be returned to the country?
Look at the Arab Spring and what happened in the Arab Spring. I mean, people, in fact, I talked before the collapse of the Mubarak regime saying that as soon as he resigned, there would be asset seizures taken all around the world, and there would be an investigation launched against him. And I was ridiculed immediately. That's absurd. He's such a close friend of powerful governments. It'll never happen. But even with people who are close friends of powerful governments, like Mubarak, yes, as soon as it happens, these steps are taken. And so, you know, if anything, I think the Karimov's family position is far, far weaker than that of Mubarak or Gaddafi. So I think if you know, if their position becomes unstable, the government is toppled, there are going to be attachments and asset freezers going on immediately. In fact, I would say even if there's a sort of popular uprising in Uzbekistan, as we see going on in Syria, for instance, you know, we see governments around the world decry what the Syrian government is doing, and then they start looking for sanctions. And right at the top of the list of sanctions that they put in place early on is to attach government assets, but more specifically, attach assets that are tied immediately to the people in power, to the Assad family, for instance. So if you look at these examples, it's quite clear what would happen in the case of Uzbekistan. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very much.